How are you? We're going to go into day two of the Higher Self series. And there is a question around how do I navigate the physical, emotional, and intellectual things that come up during this ascension evolution process. And this is important for anybody who's been going through and actively moving through their catalyzation and initiation, whether it's been from a twin flame catalyzation initiation, divine counterpart, whatever brought you to this point of being aware that you're on an ascension journey and that you want to evolve, that you want to become your best self, that you want to have access to more and more of who you are and your abilities, right? When we set out on this process, what happens is part of how we begin to embody all of who we are, our inner union, our higher self is this process of actually bridging the 3D to the 5D, right? So that we're able to hold more of those higher frequencies and codes of who we actually are and why this higher self series is important in the sense that this is one of those key pieces that's going to help you kind of feel able to be in this world, but not of it, to be able to be present with everything that's occurring, right? To learn how to navigate through the triggers and the discomforts of what you're experiencing and find what feels right for you, but also understanding that this is a major, major, major transformation that you're embarking on. And even if you've had your dark night of the soul and come through it, there's still these constant layers of transformation that we're going through. Okay. So, if you are on that twin flame divine counterpart journey, you're going through this process via like a relationship type of initiation. But there's many people who are going through it just as an evolutionary ascension standpoint that may or may not have any specific love relationship implications initially, but usually this process will affect how you interact with all of your relationships. Okay. So this really interweaves with all of those things together. Okay. And one of the things that was really coming through was this important idea that I know many of you have gone through, but I want to also interweave it with a comment that I saw yesterday, which was like, feeling triggered and feeling in the state of not trusting yourself or your intuition, having a harder time hearing your intuition or your higher self, and feeling unstable in that type of energy, despite like wanting to ask or connect with your higher self. Because some of you are going through the effort of knowing that you want to evolve, but finding yourself still feeling kind of in some of the chaotic energies. And I'll say, I know that it's uncomfortable, but it is within the chaotic energies that the transformation happens, right? The caterpillar turns to a protein soup in the cocoon before it turns into the butterfly. And so that protein soup doesn't look like much of anything but probably some chaos, right? So I want to acknowledge that it's okay that you're in those states. It does not mean you're not transforming. It doesn't mean that things aren't going to get better. It may really truly mean that you're needing some different types of supports in between the messages and information that I'm sharing. Like from where you are to where you want to be, right? If some of the messages around trusting your intuition were triggering because you're not feeling that trust with your intuition, that's okay. That's actually giving you information to step back and say, okay, I'm not ready for that part of it yet, and that's okay. What do I need to get myself to a place where I can move through some of the pain and the suffering and the trauma so I can start to actually hear my true voice versus hearing the voice of my fear or my old survival protective mechanisms pushing me forward versus my intuition. This is all natural. It does not mean that you're bad or wrong or that it's never going to get better. It simply means that you're needing a different type of support right now. You can put the videos that might be triggering you on pause and use them as an opportunity to go get yourself the support that you need. And I want to say that because it's okay that you want or need something different. In fact, having that information in and of itself can be very, very powerful. And for even those of us who have gone through this process and have felt more stable and been more grounded with this evolution process that we're going through, there are still times that we experience those unstable moments where we have to recenter ourselves. Okay. So it's a muscle that we're learning how to build and work with. It is a transformational process. And so, whether you're going through physical ailments and discomforts, or emotional discomforts, or relational or financial or work, all the potential things that can come up that are uncomfortable when there's lots of changes occurring is normal. Okay. What can happen in a lot of instances that we see in the collective is people have those opportunities to transform or to change things to get better, and it becomes uncomfortable. And then because they feel something is uncomfortable, they think that it's bad and not good for them. And then they go back to the pattern of what they knew before, because although it was uncomfortable, it's familiar. Okay. And so sometimes people choose to go into the uncomfortable but familiar versus the uncomfortable and unfamiliar because it brings up those fears. Okay. But this is where we dive into. Some of you I know are here because you reached those points where it didn't even matter. You didn't have a choice, right? Like there was no going back to anything. The pathways to the past were all blocked off because at a soul level you chose to muscle through it. Okay. Um, and that can be an intense time period as well. And what's coming through is that sometimes we activate and we call in, like, I want this change, I want it to change, I want it to change, I want it to change. And then it starts to change, and those towers start to crumble, and the pathways start to shift. And then we panic because it gets kind of scary that everything that we knew is collapsing. And then we do want to go back to some form of stability and safety, and when we're not able to reestablish that in the way that we knew, it can kick up more fears. Okay. But this is where you're going to build the muscle in trusting yourself, is through this process. Okay. I'll tell you, I went through this process and I actually knew what was happening. I knew I had called it in. I knew that it was uncomfortable. I knew everything that I knew was collapsing, and I understood it. And I still had to go get more help because I intellectually understood it, but my physical body and my emotional body and everything that was coming up in my energetic system was showing me that I didn't have all of the necessary tools that I needed in the physical world to be able to fully navigate the changes I had called in that moment. But that didn't mean that it was the wrong choice. It meant that I had to go learn what those tools were. And this is what pioneers do, loves. So if you find yourself in any of these positions where you've called in a shift, you said you don't want to keep doing what you used to be doing, you don't want to keep playing in the toxic energies or the toxic dynamics, that you want to unravel out of the codependent relationships, and then you want to invite true love into your life, and that you want to experience a genuinely prosperous life in all areas, not just financial. That means you are unraveling out of this general collective energy of comfort that was designed to keep us what feels safe and small, right? It might feel safe, but it is also to our true nature very suffocating, okay? And so what's happening is that ultimately, when you started calling in and asking for what you wanted, and you started saying, I'll do whatever I have to do, just help me move, you were essentially activating your higher self to have more control of your day-to-day life versus only operating from the 3D perspective. Okay. When you started asking for more, when you started praying for more, some of what's falling apart is being activated because in some level you said, okay, I want to be my best self. I want to be all of who I am. I want to step into my potential. And so you activated this process. Okay. Like I said, it's essentially the process of allowing whatever was in the way of your human self and your true higher soul self, and allowing the two of those parts of you to conjoin and come back together more fully. And through this process, what you're learning how to do is let your human survival self learn how to work with that higher intuitive self, right? But it's a process because your human self has been in this mode of surviving in knowing how to navigate the world in one way for your entire life, but also for generations. So this is what your ancestors knew how to do, and it's what they taught you how to do. Okay. But now you're asking to access all of that other information. And so now you're going to have to learn how to actually wield that power. Okay. And there are sometimes layers of programming or conditioning that go along with that. Okay. But ultimately, it's boiling down to more levels of inner union. The same way many of you have been learning how to navigate your inner masculine and feminine, now you're also learning how to navigate your higher essence of your soul and what you learned as a human. Okay. And for some of you, that happened in the reverse. Like you were on your higher self journey, going along, learning about how to connect with your spiritual side. And then along came kind of like a twin flame divine counterpart experience that then expanded you in that way. Okay. So, really, this process of embodying our higher self, all of who we are in essence, is learning to trust that at a soul level, our soul does know what is best for us. Our soul remembers exactly why we're here. Our soul remembers our original core soul blueprint. In this process that we're going through via a twin flame catalyzation or an ascension awakening or a star seed or a light worker or a shadow worker journey, is allowing ourselves ultimately to transmute the shadows that are inside of us, to embrace all of the parts of that we are, to shine the lights into the pockets that we didn't even know existed within us, and to allow ourselves to actually learn who we are and what our abilities are so that we can take the reins of our true co-creatorship for our life and for what we co-create on the planet in unity consciousness. Okay. So when these symptoms of are coming up, say you're wanting to move forward with creating something in your life, but you're going through an ascension process and you're exhausted and your crown chakra feels like it wants to explode and you're having an anxiety attack because you don't know what to do with yourself and you're uncertain of how to move forward, but you feel unstable and full of doubt, this is where you're going to practice dropping into trusting this process in the sense that as long as you're not in an immediate or imminent danger, you're not going to try to make a decision while you're in an anxiety attack. You're not going to try to force yourself to have an answer if you don't have clarity on what you actually want. What you can remember is that if your crown chakra feels like it wants to explode, or you're having an anxiety attack, or you're feeling like you don't have clarity and things are chaotic or confusing, this is a time to take a step back into self-care for your symptoms, right? Rest if you need to, journal if you need to, in a sense that I don't know the answers right now. And the fact that I feel so unsettled and anxious is actually a good signal that now is the time not to make a life-changing decision, to not be impulsive and try to force something into place just so I feel better in this instantaneous moment, but to say, okay, this is uncomfortable. I wish this isn't how I felt right now. But I also understand that this exact moment, this exact feeling is where I get to make a different choice. This is where I have the opportunity to say, this feels uncomfortable. I know there's a way that I could probably force myself to feel a bit more comfortable right now. I could make a decision to go into that relationship. I could choose to go use that drug or that food or that defense mechanism or distractive mechanism that will make me feel better in this exact moment. Or I could take a step back and say, what do I actually want? How do I actually want to feel moving forward, so that I don't have to keep coming to these choice points and I keep choosing the old choice, which ultimately leads me right back to this looping Groundhog Day decision, which is so ironic because today is Groundhog Day, right? So if you feel like you're in those groundhog loops where you finally say, nope, okay, I'm going to actually do something different today. I'm not going to go into my old comfort zone. I'm not going to make an impulsive decision. I'm going to let myself feel a little bit of this new discomfort. And I'm going to realize that in this chaotic feeling actually lives the true answers of what I really want and what I really want to create. And in that information, what you can do by getting your journal or getting your sketch pad is to start to think about how you really want to feel. Because I know you don't want to feel chaotic. That's why you want to go back to the old comfort zone. But instead of going to the old comfort zone, think about how you really want to feel. And then, okay, give it some space. Now look at the circumstances in front of you. Are they actually going to help you get to those feelings genuinely as you move into the future? Or are they only simply another band-aid? Okay. Because here's the thing, if you have an infection and you just put a band-aid on it, it might look better for a little bit, but it's still festering underneath the band-aid. Okay. So we want to take the band-aids off and actually start to address the infection that's been keeping this Groundhog's Day loop going. Okay. Because yes, it's uncomfortable to deal with it, but if we start to actually find the solutions, we can heal the infection, we can heal the loop. It's not going to be instantaneous like the Groundhog's Day situation remedy, but it's going to ultimately get you where you want to be in the long term. So think of it as the long game. Like this is like a visionary mindset. Okay. Like I might not get what I want instantaneously, but I'm going to have, instead of looping, I'm going to get what I want in the long run. Okay. So you start to sit with how you want to feel. And then you start to give yourself space to actually decide what you truly want to agree to and commit to in your regular physical life. Okay. And your higher self is going to help you on this process because your higher self has access to what it is that you really came here for. So even if you don't know what that is, you can say, okay, higher self, higher power, creator, I do want to align with my highest purpose. I do want to align with my highest potential. And even if I don't know what that is in this moment, that's okay because I'm going to allow myself to open up, to unravel and dissolve any of the clouds that have been in the way of me receiving these blueprints. And if it takes a little bit of time, that's okay. Even if I'm 40 or 50 or 60 or 70 or 80, because the times on this planet are changing and the energy is different than it was when I was growing up. And now I actually have the genuine opportunity to receive these blueprints that I never had access to. So I'm not going to think about my age. I'm going to forgive everything that was because we did the best that we could. And I'm going to allow myself the huge opportunity, no matter how old I am, no matter what I think I should have been doing. And I'm going to actually give myself the gift of finding out what that is now. Because even if I'm 110, I deserve that. I deserve to experience those things. I deserve to have the life that I intended for myself. And maybe part of my purpose in doing that is to do it no matter how old I am, no matter what it looks like to everybody else. I'm brave and courageous enough to let myself go through this process. I'm holding this space for myself to discover who I am and what I'm really capable of. And no, I didn't have that information in my 20s. But no one else at that time did either. And I did the best that I could at that time. But I'm brave enough to do it now. That is the type of things I want us to start to think about, okay? Because through this ascension evolution process, everything is changing. That's why I'm always speaking about space in grace. When you can drop into giving yourself space and grace to go through this transformation, to go through the uncomfortable parts that no one else either had the opportunity to or they weren't brave enough to take the option, be proud of yourself for being brave enough to do it. There's going to be a lot of people that aren't going to understand it, but I do. And so you know you have a safe space to go. And I know in all reality around this planet, there are many of us going through this process. But yes, many of us are initially going through it alone because of where we grew up or the things that we came up in. But you've also been planted in those specific places for this specific reason. It's okay. So you find your people that you vibe with, no matter where they are on the planet. You let yourself land in a safe space and start planting your seeds, love. Start letting yourself understand that this process isn't going to always be you in your very best energy. But that's not because you're not going to get there. Sometimes we have to let go of the old version of our best version to get to our true best version. You get what I mean? And in that process, man, I have to tell you, I went through it and it was hard. And I'm still sometimes going through it. There's times where I'm like, oh, today's not my greatest day. But there was a pocket of time where I was kind of clicking in my life. I had mastered some things and I felt really good about what I was doing, but I was super limited. And so I reached a point where I had to exit that situation. And in doing so, I became vulnerable and I didn't know how to master the new energy I had opened up. I didn't know how to master it at all. I knew I had a lot of tools, but it was almost like I felt like they were gone, like I couldn't access them. And what I realized was that I still had the tools, but what was happening is that I had opened up a whole different topic that now I had to learn to apply what I had learned in new ways to new relationships, in new opportunities, in new experiences. Did that mean that my old experiences were irrelevant and I didn't know what I was doing? No, it meant that I had the keys to that truck and now I had a new truck. that I had to learn how to drive. Okay. But once I started to let go of judging myself for not knowing how to drive the new truck and just said, okay, give me the keys and the manual and let's figure this bad boy out because I got to move forward. I can't just sit here in the parking lot. It was uncomfortable. But what happened was when I forgave myself and I stopped beating myself up for not being good enough, for not knowing everything, I started to learn new things. And as I started to get comfortable in those new things, some of those old skills from before started to come into play. And I started to strengthen all of it more and more. So if you were learning things and you were getting good at them, and then you open up and you meet someone else or you go into a different situation where you thought you just mastered that skill and it gets uncomfortable again, that does not mean that you did it wrong. And it does not mean that you self-sabotaged. Because I know some of you guys have that programming in your mind too. Oh, I knew how to do it, but now no, you didn't self-sabotage. Because just the fact that you're having that awareness that you're doing something new and you're willing to self-reflect is not self-sabotage. It is growth. Oh, I learned how to use the muscle in that pocket. Now I let myself be brave enough to go to the next level. And now I'm going to learn the muscle in this pocket. Okay. So it's like you learned how to drive one vehicle, and then they gave you a new vehicle that had all sorts of different buttons, and you had to drive it in a new way. Some of the things were the same, but you guys know how that is. If you ever drive a brand new vehicle that you've never been in, it's a new experience. Of course, you still know how to drive, but you have to get used to all of the gears and the functions and how it operates, right? And it takes a little bit. So then you learn that vehicle and you get comfortable with that. And then somebody pulls up a new car and you go jump in that. Okay. You still know how to drive, but you're learning new facets. And each experience you allow yourself to have without judgment, going into it knowing that you are going to build the muscle and you're going to learn, it gets easier and easier and easier to get into the next new vehicle. Because what happens is all of a sudden now you've driven in 4 or 5 new vehicles. And by the time you get to the sixth or seventh, some of the things are starting to look the same. They're starting to function the same. And you're like, oh, I know where that is because that was in that car. And you start to get a rhythm because now you're knowing how to navigate multiple new um, experiences versus like, okay, I learned this one and it's comfortable and now I don't want to leave this one. I get it. I get it. But you can keep growing and testing your muscles and building your ability to continuously transform. And why this is a beautiful thing is because what this does is it allows you to be in the present and transform into who you are and grow into who you are in each and every moment versus pigeonholing yourself into the version of who you were yesterday or an hour ago. Because the truth is you're growing and evolving every day. And that's awesome. So be forgiving and gentle with yourself. Allow yourself the space and grace to realize that you're going through monster growth spurts. And sometimes they're uncomfortable, sometimes they're awesome, and sometimes they're uncomfortably awesome. All right, loves. I know that's a lot. I'm going to leave it there. I really, truly hope that you find this information helpful, and I'll see you soon. All right, loves. If you have any questions or you want to share anything, please, drop it in the comments. I will do my best to address it. All right, loves.